This video features adult language. Viewer discretion is advised. A game is a form of fuck, in which participants, termed fuckers, make fucks in order to manage fucking through fuck tokens, in the pursuit of the most fuckingest fuck. This is the most beautiful thing. It's worth explaining, but it also speaks for itself so eloquently that I don't necessarily need to be here to explain it. This is why I need to let's play it in a fashion. It's like I'm writing a cover song of these games and adding my own lyrics and calling it analysis. It's a feigned shadow of the original, but it has a specific point. There's an information that others may find enticing or sexy. So, before we begin, I just want everyone to first take an attempt to play through these games in the links connected to this video. These games don't necessarily begin nor end, but you can always quit playing when you feel full of the game. Kinda like you would feel full of a rich dessert. At least, that's the way I feel when playing them. Go forth and play games, but please return. I'd appreciate this critique to be heard within a post-gamed context.
This is your finest fine.
There's a series of games, Nothing You Have Done Deserves Such Praise, Motherfucker Galaxy, and Problem Attic, that I pridefully and selfishly identify as absurdist games. Please don't repeat me in the categorization of these games, because it's worthless to categorize them outside of the context of this critique, and I only do so in order to identify reflections between art, play, and the systems that these games establish. All games navigate absurdism in infinite ways, and these games are by no means representative of a genre, because absurd games would be an absurd genre, as genres exist so that people can more easily market cliches. But they are special to me, and I really hope they are special to others as well.
Another score? Score. You got a score. Score. You score. This is a score. 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 Nice score. More score. Another score. You score.
These are not the only games that do this. They build off a lot of other fantastic work. On this channel, we looked at a few with Increpair's library of games. Also, we cannot discuss Absurdism in Games without mentioning the Catamites, whose Goblet Grotto is in the links below. So, there's a bit of history on this idea. But let's get into breaking down the parts of these games that give us magically infinite insight into what games are as media. The first and most obvious thing with these games is the aesthetic that draws upon cut-and-paste theories of zine work, and has historical lineage back to the found art punk movements of the early 20th century. The aesthetic is neither the only nor the most important point of subversion within these games, but it is the least subtle. The music, graphics, and other aesthetic features of each of these games work together to create a sublime chaos, and it's the first point of contention directly with the player. Sometimes the aesthetic feeds false information to the player by hiding things that harm the player. Other times, the aesthetics are confounding, or rough, or exciting, in a way to control the player emotionally in some way, in order to make the player feel happy, or safe, or uneasy, or sexy, or depressed, or any other range of emotions. The artists who create these games are very, very powerful at juxtaposing sound, shapes, images pasted together with game elements like shooting or platforming. But also remember that there is cultural subversion within these games as well. The designers of these games are directly responding to the perfectness that other games constantly strive for. They take that idea and say, I can make you feel by just bringing you into my world for a moment. These games are not bogged down by the loathsome idea of good game and unapologetically create their own expression. This is probably understood best by the colloquium punk as fuck. So let's move on to talking about subversion. The subversion of all three of these games is not just in the looks and sounds of the game, but also in the very rules of the game. Some would call this the gameplay. I would call you out for using such a useless word to effectively describe nothing. The subversion that you feel playing this game comes from the idea that these games could care less about you, the player. Players are used to being catered to. Walls are always walls, life is life, and then you die. Dying is consistently a bad thing. Gravity goes down, and when it doesn't, the game will politely oblige those changes for you. These games do not give a fuck about me. Just because I'm the player doesn't mean that I suddenly deserve to be the center of the universe, and that is a profoundly philosophical device. As Liz writes in an introduction to Problematic, Problematic is a game about prisons, both real and imaginary. One of the prisons she may be referring to by this quote is the one that the player is trapped in just by playing a game that actively defies them. This is the prison of life. This reflects the pain that being trapped in a world that actively defies their existence. So the subversion in these games don't cater to the player, and this rejection of player ends up reflecting the lives that culture rejects every day. Problematic lives a problematic life. Philosophically speaking, these games are some of the only games out there that, instead of automatically assuming the player transcends their own body, identifies the limits of the player's existence and uses those to transcend, effectively taking the problems of philosophies like transhumanism and flipping them on their head. But, I mean, I'm not a philosopher, I just play some video games. Why are we here playing video games? Aesthetics and subversive philosophies are nice, but what is it that makes these games so special within and outside of their own medium? What do these do as games? Why games? Well, we've answered those amazing questions in some ways, but now we really need to follow through. A finishing blow? Yeah, let's blow this finisher until he explodes. This is a game, so let's talk about rules. The very foundations these games are built on, the rules, follow the same subversions that we've talked about. They're fluid, rambunctious, and enjoy speaking for themselves. Motherfucker Galaxy's rules purposely restrict the control the player has. You get a very short shield that works in minuscule bursts and a laser beam that fires in different ways depending on the context of how long you hold the button down. This is a direct contrast to the predictability of each map. The enemies spawn the same way every single time, and this means the player's failure is always their own fault. In space, you have no one to blame but yourself. Both nothing you have done deserves such praise, and Problematic, as platformers, use the physics of gravity as a weapon for and against the player. Nothing you have done always hands you the ability to win each level and unabashedly praises you for what in some ways can be considered a non-effort. The rules for Nothing actively imprison the player into winning. It's like a fucked up episode of The Twilight Zone where the player can do nothing to lose or express themselves in any way outside of winning, even if they try. The game is a curse, and it hates you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Finally, the rules of Problematic. It really doesn't get more absurdist in games than when the rules change as rapidly and chaotically as they do here. Here, the rules of the game itself sadistically warp themselves from level to level in order to hurt the player and make them feel uncomfortable. Sometimes blocks are there, and sometimes they're not. Maybe you can reach that ledge with your jump, But maybe not. Oh no, here comes the pushers, just to ruin your day. Except for when they're here to help you and pass the level. And then the game ends. Or does it? Hey, who is really to tell? I mean, not me, that's for sure. This is the point when the metamorphosis happens. Maybe this isn't a spiteful relationship between the player and the game. Maybe this is a loving relationship. This is a sex of existence. By the end of Problematic, I accept my position as the submissive in this relationship, and I'm quite happy to do so. Alright, game. You're over when you say you're over and not a second before. Yes, please! So, at the most basic, fundamental level, these absurd games find a variety of ways to challenge the player, just by forcing them to exist within their fluid, fluctuating, or even static rule sets. They return games from prisons to play places, reminding us how little difference there is between sex and play. This is where the last theme of these games come in. Playing any and all of these games as gamer comes with an entitled sense of difficulty in very similar ways that seeing Duchamp's work as an arter or David Lynch's work as a filmer is difficult. The difficulty of approaching all of these games is readily apparent by those who are heavily invested in this minuscule, fake, corporate nation called mainstream games. The absurdist games enjoy rejecting difficulty as a design constraint because, as I've said before, it isn't about the player. It is, but it isn't. These games show how limiting the entire ontology of difficulty is because difficulty as a design construct reduces expression to a set of variables that can be exchanged at the player's whim. So sometimes the games are hard, sometimes they're easy, sometimes they hurt you, and sometimes they allow you to become comfortable just to pull the rug out from under you. The absurdity of these games are that they are in control, not you. When you are in control of these games, it kind of comes with the painful awareness that the game is allowing you to be in control for the time being. You could say that the difficulty is just always set to go fuck yourself. To wrap up this critique, I want to situate more specifically what makes these games so important and powerful. In my subjective opinion, most mainstream games are soulless corporate husks, especially franchised games. And that isn't the fault of current game makers necessarily, it's just that they're building off of soulless inspirations. It's a soulless cycle of self-celebration, cynically speaking. Doom begets GoldenEye, begets Half-Life, begets Deus Ex, begets Halo, begets Bioshock, begets Borderlands. This is a drastic statement, so I'll qualify it. What absurdist games force us to do, by their very nature, is to play. By changing the rules, being subversive, difficult, or otherwise obtuse, they force us to play with the rules and the systems of the game in a pure sense. These surreal games don't make the player submissive to hurt us, they make us submissive out of love and respect for us in order to give us a different perspective and understanding. We lose control so that we may regain our own creativity for ourselves. The surrealism liberates the imagination. This is the power of play. These are games that intimately access play to confine us and free us at the same time. And this is different than the bulk of video games that work to bind us along a specific path or matrix of paths in a way that eventually invisibilizes play by assuming the nature of the player as winner. What makes these absurdist games so vitally important for everyone as human beings is that they question play and reunite it with the human experience by identifying the humanity, the love, the pain, the fear, and the hope of playing a game. To quote Salvador Dali, "There is only one difference between a madman and me. I am not mad." The absurdity here may seem like madness. We can turn our nose to the air and call it uncouth. But it is quite sane and possibly one of the greatest hopes that we have for vitalizing a stagnant world. Greg Kostikyan boldly defined games as, "A game is a form of art in which participants, termed players, make decisions in order to manage resources through game tokens in the pursuit of a goal. Absurd games enjoy taking that formula and destroying it. This is a violent and sexy revolution that destroys game definitions built on something as fallible as sense. Instead, these games create a new truth that says, a game is a form of fuck in which participants, termed fuckers, make fucks in order to manage fucking through fuck tokens in the pursuit of the most fuckingest fuck." Thank you for watching. Go play games and go make art.